What's happening, everybody? Welcome to Nuts and Bolts MMA. I am your co-host. Hold on, I'm going to start this over.
Deep breaths in and out. Get that radio on.
Hello, friends. It is Thursday, June 10th, and welcome to another episode of Nuts and Bolts MMA. I am your host, Travis Montgomery, and we've got a good show in store for you today. Going to preview some UFC 263. But first, wherever you're hearing this, please subscribe to us on Apple Podcasts. We are on Stitcher. We are also on Spotify. I know a lot of Apple people use Apple Podcasts, but the non-Apple people like to use Spotify. You can still get it for free there. We are on YouTube, videos posted there. We have two co-hosts to help me with this show today. Me, myself, I'm doing good. Work has been slow. My ankle's been hurting, so I haven't been really running. But, I don't get my son this weekend. He's actually in Disneyland right now, so I'm really happy for him. He's going to Disneyland for the first time, so I'm kind of excited for him. I grew up in Orange County, where I got to go to Disneyland a lot as a spoiled little brat, but I guess it wasn't as expensive as it is now to go there. But we are triangulating from LA to Bakersfield to Maryland. I think somewhere on the East Coast over there. He's the king of the DMV, Mr. Adam Silver, not the commissioner of the NBA. But Adam, how are you doing on this Thursday evening for you? And how do you feel about these fights coming up?
Doing well, Travis. Doing well. Thank you very much. I actually just got back from my dentist appointment not too long ago. So like my mouth's a little sore, and they poke and prod, and it never seems to stop with the dentist. But besides that, it's been a pretty good day, and I'm really excited for the great card we have this weekend, UFC 263, Adesanya versus Vettori 2. Can't wait.
Oh my goodness, I can't wait to get into it with you guys. Also, we have PFL going on right now. PFL, I guess what it's called, 221 number 4. The debut of Clarissa Shields. You can catch that later. We won't really be covering that. There's also Bellator, Lima versus Amosov. I don't know. I think I might be betting Amosov in that one, but we won't be breaking that down. We'll be talking some fight news, some Twitter beef, and obviously giving you a good preview for UFC 263. The other co-host of the night is Nikki B from LA. How are you doing on this lovely Thursday afternoon for us?
I'm doing good, brother. How you doing?
I'm doing all right. I'm excited to talk about these fights, and I'm ready to get some bets down. I did pretty good the last event, and I just did a payout, which is good because I didn't work this week, and the payout went through. And shout out to crypto, because it's so much easier to get payouts through crypto and sports betting. I don't know if you're in that world at all, but payouts used to take forever if you would just get them normally, like sent to your bank account or even a check sent to your house. But I'm very grateful. It takes less than 24 hours at this point. I use for MMA a site called Bet Any Sport. It's an old 5 Dimes type of satellite. 5 Dimes kind of went under, or they changed it up or whatever, and then Bet Any Sport took that over. So I'm very grateful for that. But for now, is there anything else that we want to bring up before we start to get into some fight news?
Oh, I don't think so. I am excited to see that Clarissa Shields fight tonight. We got dinner plans after this, so I'll come back and watch it later. But I'm glad to see, another female boxer making the transition and really trying to make that career jump and not just kind of invite MMA fighters over to get beatings in the boxing ring.
True, which is what we've seen before. Okay, with that out of the way, let's get into some news. Okay, so Matt Frivola was supposed to fight Frank Camacho, but Frank Camacho got into a car accident. And unfortunately for him, it's kind of scary, but he will be now fighting Terrence McKinney. We won't be talking about that fight because it's so low on the prelims, but does anybody have any other information on what happened there, the car accident or anything like that? No, we didn't hear it. So that's kind of unfortunate. But Matt Frivola goes from being kind of a closely lined fight to Terrence McKinney, who is plus 240. I think Matt Frivola was probably going to steamroll, no pun intended, Frank Camacho. And now he has a tougher fight in Terrence McKinney, somebody who he wasn't training for. And that is relevant because this is UFC 263 that's going down this Saturday. Late replacement opponent. Do any of you guys have any thoughts on the late replacement or anything that's going on with this?
Not a lot of thoughts for me, actually. Like, there are so many other better spots I love on this card on Saturday that I'm not really. Frivola Camacho wasn't really something very high for me anyway, and I just sit down and watch the scrap with whoever this McKinney guy is now.
I think it's going to come down to whether or not McKinney is ready to make the weight. And if it's going to be a bad cut on short notice, that usually doesn't go well. It may be in his best interest to not invest too much in the weight cut, see if he can get Frivola to maybe take the fight and McKinney take the purse penalty and, just keep his health intact.
That's a very good point. Because if he has to cut a bunch of weight, he may not be slighted by the UFC if he does miss weight on that opportunity. And when it comes down to it, the UFC doesn't like it when you miss weight, but if you miss weight and win your fight, it's kind of a wash, because if you lose your fights, say you did a terrible weight cut and then you lost your third fight in a row, well, it doesn't really matter at that point.
Yeah, if he comes in and looks good, the missing weight by maybe like 4 or 5 pounds is not going to be the end of the world for him. So we'll see what happens.
He's on a 3-fight win streak, all finishes. LFA import, which the UFC likes to pick out a lot from them. By the way, Chris Wade just cashed as a plus 110 underdog in PFL. Thank you very much. Well, I guess the next bit of news that we'll get to, since we haven't gotten to it, and kind of a surprise turn of events, Paul Felder retires on his last broadcast. Also, he will be replacing DC for the broadcast booth at UFC 263. I guess I tend to like DC's energy a little bit more than Paul Felder, even though Paul Felder might be like by the numbers and the punches and the kicks, he's probably a little bit more accurate. But now, what we got to do is give Paul Felder a proper send-off. And I guess the way to do that is let's just talk about some of our favorite Paul Felder moments. All right, Adam, what do you think about this retirement? First of all, suddenly on the broadcast, and then what is like some of your most memorable?
I mean, honestly, I was a little primed for it, actually, because just the week prior, Alain Jobin had also retired, and he's also one of those guys who'd been dueling between like broadcasting or serving as TV talent for the UFC while also being an active fighter. And then Felder was in the same shoes. So like when the camera cut to him in that broadcast, before he said what he was going to say, I was like, oh, snap, Paul Felder's retiring, isn't he? Because also earlier in the week leading up to that event, Islam Makhachev which is really strange in the modern UFC. We'll get to Twitter beef, which is one of our recurring sections on the pod, but like guys just want to like go on the internet and call out, whoever they feel should be next for them at this point. Because what's his name? Islam Makhachev is booked to face some Brazilian fighter, and he's like looking past him and is like, I need someone top 5 in the lightweight division because he really is trying to climb up the rankings and get back to the title because he believes in him and all that stuff. So, well, anyway, long story short, Makachev called out Felder. Paul Felder's like, I'd rather replied and said, I'd rather sit and watch paint dry than take a fight with you. I think that was on a Tuesday or on a Wednesday. And then on Saturday, the camera cut to him, and I was like, oh, okay, tiring. And I loved something he said in his speech too. Like, coming up, he always hated those guys who held onto their like high ranking numbers, but became inactive, like didn't fight often, didn't give the people below them an opportunity to jump over them. So he's like, I would never be that guy. And now he realized that Paul, was becoming that guy who's like, okay, well, I'll just hold on to my ranking here in the UFC and I'll like pick and choose when I want to fight and everything like that. So instead of doing that, he just decides to retire and like basically clear the air in the division a little more and see who can rise to become, a new ranked fighter as a result of this. But yeah, like favorite Paul moments, like just from his LFA days, man, like when he was champion there, even like LFA Paul Felder was the truth. That was my favorite fights, or some of his earlier fights. And before he came to the UFC, and I thought he was gonna make it all the way. He got as high as like 6th rank in the division. Fan
I
favorite.
think I need
Everyone
to
loves
correct you.
Ice
It's
Dragon.
the CFFC.
Yeah, cage fight. Yeah, you're right. Thanks for the correction. Yeah, that
No,
was a promotion he came from.
before other people, before the fans and the listeners start giving.
Yeah.
Let me help you out.
Thanks for the correction, Travis. But yeah, that's my little spiel on Paul. What do you think, Nick?
I mean, I'm gonna miss Paul Felder as a fighter, but he still gets to be there as a commentator, and I enjoy him, at the desk, and I think he's going to be a nice addition to the commentary team this weekend. Being stuck outside of the top 5, I think, influenced his decision, and taking that fight on short notice with RDA, like having to go through that brutal weight cut. I think there's a little like documentary featurette about him taking that fight. And he said that if he weren't training for the triathlon, he'd be around 190 pounds. So, I mean, that's a ridiculous cut to get down to 155 for him. So, I mean, at 37, realistically being outside of the title picture, he's got maybe like a fight of the night, big name fight against somebody else in the top 10 left. But I think he just saw that he is most likely not going to be able to pursue the title. And if he wasn't in the game for that reason, he didn't want to be in it anymore. And, he valued his health enough to step aside. And like Adam said, I respect him for allowing the fighters below him in the division to, have that opportunity to move up the ranks.
Yeah.
Excellently.
Also, I think that like if he had gotten 3 finishes out of his last 4 fights, maybe his motivation to stay in there, to be, realistic about his chances of attaining UFC gold. But he's had 4 split decisions in his last 5 fights, and he lost 3 of them. Split decision. Well, I mean, that also means that one judge gave him the fight. So he's got to be realistic. He's got so much talent behind the mic. And I mean, as somebody who was a theater major coming into the sport of fighting, he can definitely, he's got some other talents out there. Adam, I didn't mean to cut you off if you had something else to say.
Oh, no. All good. I was just saying one last thing about Paul too, because he recently announced he's on this show on HBO Max. It's called Hacks. I think it's a new comedy, like a HBO Max original comedy. So he's getting his acting chops now. So he has his post UFC career and life sorted apparently. So more power to you, Mr. Felder.
Yes, and I will be looking forward to hearing him this weekend. I hope he's not a permanent replacement because I like DC. But we will be moving on to somebody else who's throwing his career away, which is Paulo Costa is out versus Jared Kennedy. I didn't mean it like there.
That's a good segue.
It was it's not fair to Paul Felder to say that, but Paulo Costa is out versus Jared Cannonier, and Kelvin Gastelum will now fight Jared Cannonier on August 21st. This is on the eve of some remarks that he has made about wanting to get paid more. He's coming out on Twitter being weird as all hell. I don't know, Nick, what do you make of this one? What the hell's going on with Paulo Costa?
I mean, it seems like Izzy got in his head in the last fight. Like there was so much build up to that. There was so much shit talking back and forth between them. And for him to lose so one-sidedly and kind of get punked and then become a meme amongst the MMA community, I'm sure it didn't do wonders for his confidence. And I don't know, he was saying that he wants out of his contract to maybe like go do something else or to get paid better. And I mean, from Dana's perspective, it's like you didn't put on a good enough performance to warrant getting a raise. And the division is probably as good as it's been in a decade. So we're ready to go ahead and just move on without you. So either get in line or get out of the way. And I think that's honestly a fair assessment at this point. If Costa doesn't want to fight, or if he at least doesn't want to fight in the UFC and he can find some way to get out of whatever his contract is, then he can move on to another organization, maybe get paid better. Who knows?
Yeah, and I agree with that. Like, I'm mostly a pay the fighters guy, but this is a situation where it still is business, right? And Paulo Costa, like the last time, just like the NFL is a "what have you done for me lately" league. That's the same way it is here in the UFC. It's a performance-based business. Like the last time you were out there, you were getting smoked in inside 2 rounds by Israel Adesanya. So, you got to show us something, come out there, take this fight that was scheduled for you against, who was it? Cannonier? Yeah, take the fight against Cannonier, go out there and knock him out cold as you've done to all previous opponents of yours, like not named Israel Adesanya. And then, when you get the mic at the end of the show, close out the show by saying, I want to be paid more. Your message would, way more value than like if you just type a few words on Twitter. Like, Dana White's never going to respond to that.
I think you hit it right on the head. It's a "what have you done for me lately" league. And the truth is he's replaceable at this point. So he doesn't have a ton of leverage.
Yep, exactly. Leverage. That's the key word. That's what it's all about.
Yeah, if you want to stay relevant, how about you win some fights and then you can start making demands. But also there's a whole nother thing coming up. And I'm about to fix this Zoom issue real quick. But okay, I do believe that fighters need to be paid more. But also, you can't look at the Logan Paul thing and compare the two because of how many viewers, it's like the WNBA argument versus the NBA. And I think a lot of these MMA fighters are looking at what these YouTubers are doing. And I mean, I kind of don't like it either, but it's a reality. Eyeballs and subscriptions and viewers are a thing.
Yeah, I agree wholeheartedly. Like Logan Paul made $20 million to dance around for 24 minutes on Sunday with Floyd Mayweather, and they both did well. But like, there was something Dana White said recently about that as well. Like, actually, I think it was in response to Costa. He was like, if you want to, make $20 million for a fight, maybe you go back and at the age of 13, start a YouTube channel that gains like wide popularity, do that for like 15 years, and in your late 20s, have enough of a followership to be able to, put on these clown show fights or whatever you want to call them. But if you didn't do that, if you didn't make all those sacrifices and you haven't invested in yourself for that long, then you shouldn't expect like the company to like kind of bounce you, And I mean, is good really for the Paul brothers to keep calling out the UFC in this way with regard to fighter pay, because it keeps their name, the Paul brothers, in the news. They're always in the news cycle now because they're doing this. So it's good for them. So it has nothing to do with like the UFC's decision to like review fighter pay or anything like that, but it's just a way for the Paul brothers to keep themselves in the news. So yeah.
Well, it seems to be working, whatever the fuck they're doing. I just had to upgrade the Zoom payment, and we did it in real time, and we will keep moving on. Speaking of the PFL, Fabricio Verdum. So that story just keeps getting sadder and sadder, going from submitting a guy to tapping him out to getting pulled from his next fight because of brain swelling. Nick, I think you said it best in the chat. Like a lot of these strikes were after the tap.
Yeah, he had worked for that submission. He got the tap, and being a veteran, and I think he's like 43. He's been doing this for a long time. He recognized that his opponent tapped, and so he just kind of pumped the brakes on the fight, and he absorbed a lot of damage from a strong guy in a bad position. And, so he didn't even get it overturned to a win, even though there's replay evidence that the Athletic Commission didn't want to, I guess, take into account in the ruling. So he is stuck with a no contest there. He doesn't advance in the tournament, so that hurts his livelihood in terms of being able to possibly win this tournament and make the money there. And he maybe lost his whole career because of it.
Yes. So in an MMA fighting article, 1 week after they reported the Brazilian fighter would not be able to return to action, just 7 weeks after being stopped via TKO by Renan Ferreira, the result obviously overturned to a no decision, according to a statement released by his PR rep. This is Fabricio Verdum's PR rep. The fighter's neurologist, his doctor, did test after the Ferreira fight and decided not to allow the UFC former champ to return to training due to swelling in the brain. And I don't know, there's some scary statements in the world of MMA, and swelling in the brain is got to be up there with like severe neck injury or whatever. And this is Fabricio Verdum, who is in the argument as the best heavyweight to ever fight MMA. Adam, what's your take on this? Scary stuff, right?
Yeah, I agree with you completely, man. It just shows you just how real this thing is. Like, they go out there, warriors, Fabricio has probably been doing this for over 2 decades, and eventually like something like this was bound to happen. But Nick stated it perfectly. He had that fight won, done and dusted. As a gentleman, as a professional, he let the submission technique go. Like he should have, held on until the opponent passed out or something, and then the referee would realize. But it's like, I'm a vet, I get my win, I get my points, let's move on. And then a shit show of officiating, as we all witnessed in real time. And the Athletic Commission is aware of that enough to overturn it to a no contest. But I agree with you, Nick. It should have gone a little further and given him his win, and now he has to deal with the consequences of those late blows, probably for the rest of his career, maybe the rest of his life. Just all the best to him. All the best, Fabricio. That's all I can say. It's sad that happened, but all the best to you.
So the doctor didn't say exactly which part of the brain it was, but it says it was around the temple area of the head associated with the temporal lobes, which are responsible for processing auditory information, memories, emotions, and certain parts of visual perception, which you need during the fights. At this point, he had a good run. He's even looked great late in his career, but who knows what he's going to look like 10 or 20 years from now. It might be I would never tell anyone directly to retire, but that's some scary stuff. And I guess we will move on to our last news segment. GSP gets a statue at his hometown of Saint Isidore, Quebec, Canada. In his statement about getting a statue, I'm very touched by this honor that my youth and municipality gives me. I hope GSP Place will be a place for inspiration and encounters for all generations and a symbol of perseverance, especially for young people with big dreams. So his hometown is acknowledging him. I think this is a big deal because GSP is a great ambassador of the sport. He's in the conversation as one of the best welterweights ever. He's held numerous, I guess you would say, records for defenses at one point. So that's a good thing for him to happen, right? Anything else to add to that one?
Yeah, like just real quick, I agree with you, man. Like, and this is a next step into turning like the big four sports, if you will, here in America into like a big five, and adding like MMA as a whole into that is just like basketball, football, hockey, and I guess soccer, if you want to say. Like, you go in front of the stadiums and arenas where these are held, and legends of the teams, the legends of the places have their statues out there, right? And now GSP's, it's in his hometown, so you're like, okay, someone can have their claim to fame from being a UFC fighter and do that excellently enough, you can earn yourself a statue somewhere. That's just like the next step, like with the TV deals and just like MMA on the mainstream channels everywhere, like the whole ABC thing that started out this year, the Holloway versus Cater card and Vittoria versus Holland, but we're on ABC. So like, it's just the next step, man, in the sport getting more and more widespread appeal. And kudos to GSP, well earned.
100%. GSP was the guy that probably made me cheer for the sport, right? Like, I started watching right around the time where he debuted in the UFC, and I had seen some of his fights, TKO. And it was his loss to Matt Hughes the first time, where he kind of picked Hughes up, put him on his shoulders after the fight, and just like acknowledged that he lost to the better man and celebrated the better fighter. And I think what I've seen from George throughout his career is that he's a martial arts purist, 100%. Like, when you listen to him talk about the sport and like the changes that could be made, like, he really loves martial arts. And I think the statue is an important acknowledgement of, like Adam said, his ambassadorship of mixed martial arts, especially globally, because it gave the UFC someone from like a neighboring country in Canada to come in and like bring the whole country following with them. And then that led to a guy like Michael Bisping having kind of the same thing happen, and Connor having the same thing happen. And when you look at the UFC against brands like the NFL or the NBA, like, those brands have global appeal across the rest of the world, but they don't have a footprint the way the UFC does. Like, the UFC can go hold these events in other parts of the world and have fighters from other parts of the world and these huge followings. So George, I think, is a huge part of making the UFC the brand that it is. And, if they have the space to make some statues outside of T-Mobile Arena, I wouldn't object to him getting his statue put outside of that arena at some point in the not too distant future.
Huh. If they did have to put some statues out at the T-Mobile Arena, I wonder who would be the first one. Maybe Anderson or Connor.
Maybe Chuck.
Chuck. Or Randy.
Yeah, Dana has been public recently in like recent podcast appearances of his love for Chuck. Is like, Chuck is like, of the OG of that generation. He's the guy, the Iceman.
He was the first superstar. I think Tito was kind of like a big star, but Chuck became like something else. Yeah.
It was the rivalry with Tito that catapulted him beyond just being like a cage fighter and became like a celebrity athlete on the level of maybe not some like, the biggest stars in other sports, but recognized by those big stars in other sports is what made Chuck really popular.
Yeah, because those athletes recognize that I might be more popular than them, but this dude will kick my ass like real fast.
You got
And
it.
there's a respect level there. We have a little bit of Twitter beef to get into. So why not? I'll just plug it in there. Okay, Brian Ortega has a message for Colby Covington. I'm not sure where this came from, but Brian Ortega issued a challenge. He says, let's do this at 165. I'll make your name relevant. We don't bitch where I'm from. LA bitch, West up.
Yeah. All right. So a little just to add to that before we start talking about the background. Colby versus Kamaru, Colby and Kamaru rather had supposed to be the coaches on Tough 29, right? But then like after Kamaru Usman beat Gilbert Burns earlier this year, he called out Jorge Masvidal, and they decided to make that the headliner of the first card back with fans, 261. And then so he couldn't be there while the event was filming, while Tough 29 was filming. So they now Volk and Ortega had their fight called off. So the UFC says, instead of having you return all the way around the world, Mr. Champion, we'll have you hang around and coach Tough alongside your opponent. And then they both signed on and agreed to that. So long story short, Colby, in his mind feels that that's a slight against him. This is something that's been stolen from him in a way. So he's been calling out both Volk and Ortega about it. And just by the nature of the two men, Volkanovski wouldn't respond to any call outs from Colby Covington. And Brian Ortega has now taken it upon himself and is like, you know what? F you, Colby. I didn't steal Jack from you. And if you want to say something about me, how about we throw down and fight it out? To which I'm like, Ortega, good for you to show you're tough and everything, but you have a chance to become champion at 45 here, and every day you're seeing the person who you're supposed to fight. I would focus more on learning how to beat Volkanovski than calling out Colby Covington for catch weight fight that that just came out of thin air, as you said, Travis.
Yeah, and Colby has been doing these interviews, and it's just been kind of shitting on both of them. Nick, do you have anything to add to this one?
I would say it doesn't surprise me that Covington is the kind of guy who's going to complain that this was taken from him when it's not something that was in his hands anyway. I would like to see Brian Ortega kick his ass at 165 pounds, but the likelihood of that happening is very slim for a number of reasons. So like Adam said, Ortega's got his title shot against Volk. I'd like to see him, focus on that. And maybe if he wins the belt, then he can call his own shots. And if they want to do some weird catchweight fight, go for it. It's his career.
Yeah, I would be up for it. Colby and Kamaru have been, I guess they've signed the contract, but it's nothing's official yet. So Colby's got his hands full too. We'll be bringing you some more Twitter beef as it happens. John Jones, where you at? Because you have made this segment so much more doable. But there is a lot of fun things that happen on Twitter, and we will bring you those things when they happen. We have people scouring the globe in each corner of Twitter. But for now, let's get into why most of us are here, which is the 263 preview, the UFC 263 preview. So we are in Arizona for UFC 263. The rematch of Marvin Vettori versus Israel Adesanya. Their first fight actually took place in Arizona. This will be in front of a live crowd. I think they all will be from here on out. There's so much to get to, so many great fights. This is one of the good summer cards that the UFC provides for us. We've got 2 title fights. We've got an extra 5-round fight in there from 30,000 feet. Let me get both of your expectations, anticipations on what this card is for you before we start to dive into the fights. Adam, I'll go to you first.
Yeah, from 1,000 feet, man, I just have to say, and still ×2. I expect both Izzy and Davison to go out there and handle their business. I actually think they will get it done inside a distance, but we'll get to the specifics of that later. But yeah, I expect it to be a great night of fights. Like, the curtain opener for the main card, Jamal Hill versus Paul Craig. That fight has caught interest of more people recently, say based on some Twitter beef. So this should have been in the previous section too, I guess. But like, yeah, Hale stands
off the ball on that one, but that was more because of a hotel interaction.
Yeah.
We'll move it on.
Yeah, but yeah, it's a good card. I'm excited for it.
Nick, do you place any bets at all, or are you just a diehard fan?
I used to a little bit. Like, I had a lot of parlays get blown by like one fight, and I was just lost the enthusiasm for it. I used to pick like one fight that I liked the odds a lot and just bet what I was going to bet on that one fight. And I was doing really well for a time. And then I was getting confident. I was like, I'll put some parlays together. And then one fight would go wrong and my confidence was shot. So I kind of backed out. But, it's a Nate Diaz fight weekend. So I'm always amped for that. Can't help it. It's a great card though overall, but I gotta put my emphasis on the Nate fight, just because if he wins that fight, of all the fights, that's supposed to be the least competitive. So him winning that, I think, would do more for that card than anybody else, maybe pulling an upset, or even like Adesanya winning and Figueiredo winning convincingly and in highlight fashion. I think Nate winning would be the biggest thing to happen on that card.
I agree 1,000%. Same way like Tug Rose hitting Zhang Wei Li with that kick in Jacksonville had the biggest pop of the night. It's the same way here. Like the third card of the third main event of the card has a chance to be the best fight of the night. Nate goes out there does something and finishes or gets a decision over Leon Edwards. And then after the fight, his typical antics and his post-fight interview, it's going to be crazy. It would definitely be the biggest pop of the night, for sure.
Yeah, I'm not surprised. Motherfuckers, he would definitely say that. Yeah. Or have some kind of mic drop moment.
Yeah.
Similar, but let's start off. We're not going to do the whole card, but we are going to start in the prelims. Because we usually do the main card, but there's so many good fights here. We'll start with Eric Anders versus Darren Stewart. Now, this is a rematch of a fight that just happened a couple months ago, where there was a foul and it turned into a no contest or whatever. Let's go to Adam first and then pass it to Nick on what do you think about this fight? And who's your pick?
Okay, so just a bit of sour grapes to start off. Like the first time they fought, Eric Anders started and ended the week as the plus money side. It was plus 140 right before the fight started, I believe. And, when the fight started up until the point of the foul, at least it was clear to me that Eric seemed to, be the bigger, more dominant man in there. And I expected him to go on and win and cash as an underdog. And now, the signs have flipped and is a minus 145 slight favorite. So still very bettable, but I like Eric in the spot and I expect him to finish what he started last time out.
Yeah. Also, this fight is at light heavyweight. The one before that was at middleweight.
Oh, that's interesting.
So Darren Stewart is a natural middleweight. I think Eric Anders, he cuts a lot of weight to hit that 185 mark. So, Nick, what is your perspective on this one?
Anders has looked better of late, and I think more time is probably in the recipe for a victory on his side. So, like Adam said, he looked like he was the bigger, stronger guy in there in the last fight. He's got more time to prep. He's got unsettled business, so I think Anders probably gets the job done. And like you said, very bettable still at what, minus 140, minus 150. So not a huge favorite at all. But Anders is still on the way up. Stewart seems like he's kind of been in the same place for a while. Good fighter. So we'll see if Anders can make the right kind of adjustments to get the finish and look impressive and make a push up the ladder.
Yeah, I do agree. Eric Anders is the right pick here, and I'm surprised the line's not bigger. Just to recap, for the last event, we already did that, but I'm minus 2 units since the podcast started, giving bets out on the podcast. Yeah, I'm going to go ahead and say Eric Anders for 1 unit. Minus 150 is what the ESPN odds say right now. I'm going to go ahead and lay it because this fight's at light heavyweight now, and I've said it before that rematches don't go the same way, but I kind of feel like this one has a chance to kind of look the same way it did before. Darren Stewart, don't get me wrong, is a great kickboxer, but Eric Anders with his team now in Arizona, a fight-ready team, I think they will have him ready for this fight, no pun intended. But let's move on to, I think, one of my most confident picks of the night, which would be Drew Dober. He's minus 150, 23-10-0 versus Brad Riddell, plus 125. He's 9-1. Adam, what do you think about this?
Yeah, I like, speaking of teams, Elevation Fight Team has to be one of the most buzzing camps in the entire MMA world right now, with Kamaru Usman, Rose Namajunas, Justin Gaethje, and Drew Dober, who last time out, I mean, he got dulled by Islam Makhachev, but who wouldn't at 155, honestly? And now he faces Brad Riddell. The City Kickboxing guys, this is something weird. Like, they always have multiple CKB fighters on any card Easy's on, obviously, because they all travel together. But they've never, I noticed this is just anecdotal, so there's no real scientific backing behind it. But they've never all won or all lost. Like, there's always a split here. And so I'm fairly confident in Izzy winning later on in the card for sure. So that's even more reason for me to be like, Brad Riddell's probably going to lose and City Kickboxing is going to go 1-1, because that's what they always do. 1-1, 2-1, 3-1. They're never all winning or losing. It just is crazy. But anyway, I do, long story short, I like Drew Dober. I say he wins a decision or finds a way to get a finish in the later minutes. So if you have a fight goes over a round and a half there, I'd say that's a good bet to make. It sees the latter half of the second round, and then maybe Drew is just too much for him later on in the fight. That's how I'm looking at this.
I think that's a fairly accurate take on it. I mean, for me, I'm looking at Dober's quality of loss, and he lost to Makhachev, which no shame in that. And his only other loss in the last 4 years so far is Dariush, who, is a couple fights away, maybe one fight away for fighting for the title at 155. So those are not bad losses at all. He's got maybe 3 times the experience of Riddell. And plus he's not traveling from the other side of the world. And I think that favors him. And I'm curious, like you were talking about the camps, when multiple guys from that camp are fighting on the same card, like, where is the emphasis for that team to focus their energy on getting someone ready to win? Is it focusing on getting Adesanya ready to defend the title, or is it going to a guy who's 9-1, who might win and is a promising young fighter, but there's only limited amount of resources that can go around in fight prep. So I would think that those are going to Adesanya.
Agreed.
So Islam Makhachev might be your next like reigning lightweight champion when he gets up there. He's fighting Thiago Moises next. That's not going to get him a title shot. I mean, maybe not. But other than that, he definitely looks like Khabib 2.0 with the different little flares on his ground and pound. So there's, like you said, no shame in that. But let's look at the competition. Drew Dober has beat Alexander Hernandez. Shit, I just knocked my cable out. All right, am I back on this mic?
Yeah, we hear you.
Let me make sure I'm back on this mic. Okay. So level of competition, Alexander Hernandez versus Nasrat Hapcrast, even Polo Reyes. And he's been finishing these dudes, okay? Brad Riddell, well, he's very good on his feet, but he's got moments where he still gets busted up, even by Malarkey. I don't have it pulled up right now real quick. Magomed Mustayev, you know, he was busted up at the end of that fight, but he's all winning these decisions unless he's got a super higher level than he was before, unless he's gotten like so much better. I think that this is Drew Dober's fight. And I'm going to be betting 3 units to win 2 on Drew Dober because he is one of my most confident picks. I have a lot of bets for this one. I'm going to try and get out of this -2 unit hole. So let's freaking go. Anything else to add before we move on to the next fight?
I would say Riddell has said that like he's going to go out there and murk Drew Dober and he's going to smash him, whatever. It's like his last 4 fights have all ended in decision. So he hasn't even finished anybody recently. So like you said, unless there's some significant jump that he made between his last fight and this fight, Dober seems to be the smart pick there.
Yep. And not only that, I think this fight stays standing. Neither one of these two are going to go for a takedown. And Drew Dober has the most square jaw in the history of humanity. So how can you?
It literally looks like he has something in his mouth at all times. It's a cartoonish draw.
It is. He looks like a Marvel superhero character.
Yes.
Okay, so another one that I'm really confident in, Jamal Hill, -300. He's 8-0 undefeated versus Paul Craig, the Bear Jew, +240, who was 14-4-1. We'll just keep the same route that we're going. Adam, how do you feel about this one?
I like Jamal Hill. The only thing I worry about is if he'd let the whole, lead up to the fight and all this stuff that's going on, all the Twitter beef get into his head. If he just says, hey, I'm 8-0, I'm going out there just beating the next guy in front of me, making my way up to a division that's very gettable. If he keeps the main thing, this is a fight I see him finishing in the first round. If not, he gets cut in a submission by Paul Craig, and the fight's over regardless. So 2 plays I really like on this fight are under 1.5 rounds for whatever you can get it, and also fight does not go the distance. I think either person has a route to finish this thing really quickly, but I think more often than not, Jamal Hill gets it done.
Under 1.5 rounds is +100 right now. That's a good bet. And fight does not go to decisions, -285.
That's
definitely some parlay material.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
What do you think about this one, Nikki B?
I like Craig, honestly. He's got twice the experience. He would most likely lose a striking contest. And you got to just look at if Hill doesn't find a way to put him away in the early part of the fight, they start grappling, you would have to start favoring Craig. So I think he's a live underdog at like +200. but Craig fights like, you know, he gets into some wars, like the fight that he had with Shogun, right? And then if you look at Jamal Hill's style, like he fights behind his length very well. And he seems to get a lot of power on the end of his punches and use his leverage really well. So if he can just keep the fight standing and force Craig to deal with the power shots for the first like 3 or 4 minutes, like he could probably stop the fight in the first round. He just has to not get into any unnecessary grappling exchanges, especially not when Craig is at his most fresh.
Yes, and Hill has gotten taken down, but he always pops back up. And I think he's always getting better. I think he is a hot prospect to watch out for, like Ankalaev in the light heavyweight division. And yeah, Paul Craig, he's always that sudden threat kind of submission. Dude, just throw it up at the end after even being rocked, after even losing for most of the fight. But you know what? I've got to go with Hill here. He is a parlay piece for me. Moving on to the next fight, I'm going to pair him with someone in this next fight who you guys could probably already guess, unless you have anything else to say about Hill.
I would just say that the fight that Craig wants in that fight, he has to go through the fire in order to get the fight where he wants it. And if Hill can just stuff like an early takedown, he's got enough weaponry and enough firepower to make Craig pay for it really badly if he misses on the takedown attempt early in the fight. So the other option is maybe Craig like tries to wait out the storm into the later rounds, but Hill also isn't like winging wild power shots out there. Like he picks his shots carefully, digs to the body. He's got good knees in the clinch. So he's not just like dumping high energy techniques with no results. So waiting for him to tire himself out is not a very good method to victory either. So if you're Craig, you really have one of two choices, and both of them are highly dangerous roads for you. And, you know, maybe he wants to try and just get it done sooner rather than later, and he'll go in for the takedown and force the grappling exchange to happen early. So I think it'll be interesting to see how the fight goes, but Hill is the rightful favorite there.
Yeah, I think this fight is very similar to the Bilal Muhammad versus Damian Maia, which we have up next. Bilal Muhammad minus 220. He's 18-3. Damian Maia is a plus 180, 28-10. Definitely future Hall of Famer. Somebody who's going to want to get this fight to the ground, similar to Paul Craig. But is he going to be able to do that, Adam? What do you think?
I don't think he'll be able to do that very successfully. Bilal is kind of well put together for 170. I'm sure he walks around in there like 178, 180, maybe even something more, really. And Damian Maia has been doing this for 2 decades as well. He's 43 years old now. You know, I believe they say this is his retirement fight as well. So that provides him extra motivation to want to go out there and get it done. And now maybe he just winds back the hands of time, and Father Time grants him one last blessing. And, you know, because Damian Maia in his prime would not be a plus 190 underdog to Bilal Muhammad. He'd destroy him. So I might be a little less confident in this one than you are, Travis. I definitely wouldn't have it in the parlay, but Bilal is the favorite and should find a way to win. And, you know, with Bilal fights, it's when playing Bilal, instead of playing Bilal, I just tell everyone just rather play Bilal by decision, because that's how the guy tends to go. You know, get a little better odds in doing that as well. So yeah, what do you think, Nick?
I mean, I love Damian Maia. He's one of my all-time favorite fighters. I mean, he's on the wrong side of 40 for combat sports, but he's still been fighting at a high level for a long time, and he exposed guys that are not good enough to handle his grappling. And I think he also has become a trickier striker as he's gotten older. He's not the kind of guy who's really going to knock you out with a power shot, but he disguises his left hand really well in how he sells his takedown attempts. So most guys know the takedown attempt is coming, and Damian Maia still somehow gets a single leg on him, pushes him up against the fence. He's on their back, and he's choking him out in the first round. So it's hard for me to pick against Maia in this fight, although, Muhammad's 18-3 for a reason. And maybe it's heart wanting to pick it, but I'm looking at the underdogs on the card and who's got a good shot and good value on the plus side. And I think Maia's got a legitimately good shot to choke him out.
Well, yeah, he does. I think even if he gets his back in the first round, Bilal is a very intelligent fighter. I think he was studying to be a lawyer at some point. His parents wanted him to go that route, but he ended up in the UFC training at Rufus Sport. I still think even if Damian Maia gets the takedown, is able to get his back, we've seen people able to last, and I don't think Bilal is going to make those kind of mistakes where Damian Maia gets a choke. Obviously, it's not going to be a surprise to anyone if Damian Maia is able to submit Bilal Muhammad. But at 43 years old, this is not a good look for him. And I also think that when you have one foot out the door in your retirement fight, a lot of these retirement fights do not go well for these people. This sport is very unforgiving.
You're right. And it's a big opportunity for Muhammad to get a win over a guy like Damian Maia, who I think is still ranked 9th. So he's still in the top 10. And he's, like you said, a Hall of Famer. So that's a big scalp to have on your resume. And it'll get him back closer to title contention, like the fight with Edwards would have done had he showed himself well in that fight, regardless of a win or loss.
True. So, yeah, I'm going to be throwing a unit on a Bilal Muhammad and Hill parlay, which is minus 110. So I'm actually risking 1.1 units to win one in that one. Adam, do you have any bets yet on this card or up to this point on the card?
Yes, definitely. I haven't built any parlays yet, but based on the things we've gone over, I did take Eric Anders again at minus 145, as I said, because I believe he can get it done. And as well as Drew Dober. I have Drew by KO in round 3, a little sprinkle on that, like 0.1 unit. It was good plus odds I liked. So just what I explained, Brad, see him finishing this one late because Riddell's pretty durable himself. And then I also have a play on a Jamal Hill 1 unit round 1 knockout. Just get it done, get it over with. Yeah, just I like going for the plus money odds for the big favorites, where it's like find a way to get them plus or at least like even money instead of laying the chalk.
No, I agree. I agree with you. Sometimes I find myself in these situations with the props too. That can be very frustrating. Just like losing a parlay.
Yeah, for
one leg of a parlay.
But what are the odds on Maia to win by submission?
I'll tell you right now.
Let's see real quick.
I see plus 365.
Yes, that sounds about right. On the DraftKings Sportsbook, Damian Maia to win by submission is plus 380.
Yeah, I mean, those are pretty nice plus odds to throw a flyer on a guy whose most likely route to victory is by submission.
Yeah, I don't see him winning a submission or a decision. I mean, so Maia by sub is plus 405 5 times.
I just don't know that Muhammad has dealt with a grappler that's on the level of Damian Maia. I mean, you saw it in the Ben Askren fight, right? Ben Askren was like, my grappling is good. I've out-grappled everybody my entire career. And then he got in there with Damian Maia and got choked out. Like, that's how good Damian Maia is, that he'll take one of the best career grapplers and choke him out. So, like, Muhammad obviously is not Ben Askren in the wrestling game, but he's a better striker than Ben, and he's going to make Damian have to work to earn the opportunity to try and choke him out. So I'm interested in that fight. I love Damian Maia. I don't want to see him retire on the bad side of a beating. So let's get Damian a submission victory.
I feel your sentiment, but Ben Askren also, he was not at the top of his game by the time he got to the UFC.
Fair.
With all the injuries that he had sustained throughout his wrestling career before he even got into MMA. But there's my bet. I would definitely not be mad at losing that bet by seeing Damian Maia go out on a winning level, especially since, the first thing I ever trained was jiu-jitsu at 12 years old. So I always had kind of a knack for the jiu-jitsu guys. I wrestled in high school, so I kind of have a thing for some of the American wrestlers. Not always, but definitely a fun fight. Definitely, but again, in this sport, the young eat the old, and we've seen it happen time and time again. I think this is another case of it. The Bilal versus Leon Edwards thing. Leon looked like a straight up killer in that fight, which is a good segue into Leon Edwards versus Nate Diaz. He is minus 575 right now, is what we're getting on ESPN. There's obviously always different odds you can find at other places. I'm just giving what's offered at the ESPN app right now. And a lot of the times when they say it on the broadcast, they're so wrong. Like because the lines change, on fight day a lot when the big money starts coming in. But anyways, 18-3, Leon Edwards versus Nate Diaz, 21-12. Don't let the records fool you. He has been a top level competitor for a long time. Huge underdog here. Adam, how do you see this one going?
Honestly, heart is with Nate, head is with Leon. Leon has been fresher, more competitive, and I think he goes in there, finds a way to smother Nate for the best part of 25 minutes and win the decision. So right now I see Leon Edwards by decision at plus 120. No way I'm paying minus 500, which is what I see for Leon Edwards outright. I'd much rather play the path to victory, which I think is because Nate's been out the game for a while, so I expect his durability to be up. And he requested this fight be 25 minutes. He insisted upon it. There's a reason why he wanted that. So I don't think he'll get go in there and get finished really quickly or anything like that. So I also don't think he has enough to beat Leon Edwards in 2021. But go ahead and surprise me, Nate Diaz. But yeah, my lean on this one is Leon Edwards by decision, and I have that as a pick for one unit, plus 120.
That's definitely the best money odds you're going to get on Leon. And should that fight maybe get out of his control, where's his interest in really stopping Nate in maybe chasing him into some positions that he shouldn't go into, giving Nate an opportunity? I don't see him doing that if he's ahead. If he's winning at striking range and controlling the fight, there's no need for him to take any chances. So he probably would win a decision under those circumstances. I'm never going to count out Nate. I remember going into the Conor fight, people were asking me, does Nate have a chance? I'm like, yeah, he's got a chance. He's Nate Diaz. He's super durable. Like you said, he requested the fight be 25 minutes for a reason because, he's training triathlon stuff all the time. His cardio has never been in question. His chin has really never been in question. He got head kick TKO'd once many years ago. So is he really going to get knocked out by Leon? I don't know. Probably not. The odds of Leon stopping the fight via TKO are probably more via the cut route because Nate almost always gets cut and Leon likes to throw elbows in the clinch and Nate likes to fight in the clinch. So there's probably going to be some elbows and some cuts here. Like you said, the smart pick is Edwards. There's a reason he's almost like a minus 600 favorite. But yeah, my heart's always going to be with Nate in this fight because it would be, like we talked about earlier, it'll be the biggest moment of the card if Nate gets that win. And I think he's probably a more live underdog than the odds would suggest. So if you want to take a flyer on somebody just for fun, like that's not bad at probably plus 380 or some crazy number like that.
Okay, well, I'm gonna kind of disagree with you guys. I think Leon Edwards is gonna get a finish here. The way that he looked in the Bilal Muhammad fight, his power and the accuracy, the timing, everything's good. Nate does not check leg kicks at all. Obviously, he's got the cardio for days. He runs triathlons with his brother and all that. I just think that we are dealing with a different caliber of fighter here in Leon Edwards. He, in my opinion, needs to be fighting some of the top 5 guys that I don't believe Nate Diaz could deal with at all. This was a really strange pick for me. And I know that you guys were saying that, yeah, he chose this to be a 5-round fight. Either way, I think that you're choosing a better striker to go against. I think Leon Edwards is just going to pick him apart on the feet. His power is going to be too much for him, I believe. And I don't even think it's going to be a cut. I think it's going to be flatlined Nate Diaz, something that we haven't seen ever before. I know it sucks to say that, but the more I think about it, the more this just does not add up for him at all. So I'm going to be risking 2 units on the under 4.5 at minus 132. And I'm going to be putting a half round, and this is going to be official on the podcast, not something that I give out on fight day that's not counted. I'm going to be taking Leon Edwards in round 3 and Leon Edwards in round 4 for a half unit. If this ends up going to the round 5, then I think, Adam, you win your bet. This is one of those ones where if it makes it that long, then I think they've kind of figured each other out and how to kind of last. So
Nate's not the kind of fighter to go in there to try to make the fight last, though. And if you look at Edwards, he hasn't won by stoppage since 2018. Like, he really hasn't been that active either. But
I think he's getting better. I honestly think he's getting better.
I would hope so. He's 29. He's ascending. I like his style, right? But he's been fighting a lot of 3-round fights. So I think, honestly, the later the fight goes, the more it favors Nate, because Edwards is going to slow down at some point. He's got a lot of movement on the outside, which helps him dictate his striking range. He uses a lot of energy to work the clinch positions when they do close the distance to his advantage. And if, I don't know, fighting that way for 15 minutes is exhausting, and Nate is always going to be coming forward. So it's in Edwards' best interest to stop the fight before it reaches the championship rounds, because that's when the cardio is really going to come into play. And if he's fighting backing up, it's going to be more tiring. So he's going to have to establish the center of the cage and force Nate back. And he's going to have to be the hunter, not the hunted, where Nate's style is typically the guy who's coming forward and positioning you and making you fight off your back foot.
Right. And so that's why I think if it reaches round 5, then it's going to go to decision. But, honestly, I think he's just going to land something crazy on Nate, and Nate's going to fall. Well, I know a lot of people don't like to hear it. I'm a big Nate Diaz fan too. But that's just where my mind's going. It might even happen in round 2, like you said. But
I think he's got to try to stop it early. I wouldn't want to fight a cardio-based volume output striking battle with any of the Diaz brothers,
Okay, but here's this, for instance. What Nate barely survives round 2 and then round 3 starting. I mean, that would be a favor of Leon Edwards if Nate Diaz is all busted up. And don't get me wrong, taking shots will drain your cardio. And just because it hasn't happened before doesn't mean that it's not going to happen this week. I just feel like the striking of Leon Edwards is on another level, especially the leg kicks and the body kicks that Nate Diaz just refuses to acknowledge. And then he'll act like he won. You know, we could probably get some shades of that. He's just a little, they're just a little delusional in their own world. I don't see why Nate chose this fight. This was a bad decision for him, and I think he's going to end up paying for it. And maybe the end of his UFC run. But if I'm wrong, then I won't be that mad because I am such a big Nate Diaz fan. But and that's why I don't like this fight for him, because I'm just like, what the hell are you doing, dude? There's other fights out there you could have taken. Adam, anything else to add to this?
No, I think you pretty much said it all. Like, we'll wait and see. Like, I think just to finish with what I started with, like, my head's with Leon. I think Leon wins, but my heart's with Nate. Come on, Nate. Let's see you do it one more time. We'll see how it goes.
It reminds me of when BJ Penn made the jump back to 170 years ago, and he wanted the GSP fight because GSP was the up and coming young stud who was making his move towards the title. And had he beat GSP, he would have, leapfrogged him in line for a title shot. And in the first round of that fight, BJ, cut him. I think he broke his nose or like tore some cartilage in George's nose. And George had to fight a very different fight after that. So I understand the mentality of Nate Diaz wanting this fight.
Yeah, true. But also be careful what you wish for. And that's where the whole Greece came in. I don't know if you guys were around for that.
For what?
The Greaser Gate or whatever. When
BJ Grease Gate. That was the second GSP BJ fight.
Yeah.
That was the rematch.
That was two.
Anyways, yeah, should be entertaining. We got 3 5-round fights on this card. But now we will move into the flyweight division, flyweight title fight. Deiveson Figueiredo, minus 220. He is 21-1 versus Brandon Moreno, 18-5-2. Adam, tell me what you think.
Deus the Gator, the God of War. That's his nickname, Deiveson Figueiredo. Like, I believe the guy. Like, he said he was sick going into the first fight, and he still won that first fight without, like, if you give him back the point that referee Jason Herzog had the judges take away. I just watched that fight today again, actually, this morning before I went to the dentist. It was a clear win for Deiveson. It wasn't as close as people thought. Now it was a great fight. It's one of the better title fights in the promotion's history for sure. But like, there was one guy who won more of the rounds, and that was a champion. And I think he comes out this time and makes a statement and finishes Brandon Moreno within the first 2 rounds, I'd say. Sometime within the first 2 rounds. It could be a submission. It could be a knockout. Depends on how the fight goes because he's capable of both. But give me Deiveson Figueiredo inside the distance. Give me Deiveson Figueiredo round 1 finish, round 2 finish, whatever those odds are. That's how I see this fight playing out. How about you, Nick?
I think the consensus is that Figueiredo won the fight, even though it was a draw, right? And I think the majority of people that I've seen that favor Moreno, like, earning the draw or maybe even having won the fight is because we've seen just Figueiredo just destroy everybody else, right? So Moreno is a smart fighter, intelligent guy. He's got an interesting, like, tricky style to deal with. And he's got to know that Figueiredo was dealing with some, I think it was like stomach issues. He was in the hospital like before the fight. So he's got to know that that's in the narrative. He's also got to know that Figueiredo's coming out to try and prove a point. So I think he has to fight an extra smart fight this time. He got to be in there once with him. So at least he got to see the stylistic approach that Figueiredo's going to bring to the fight. And he didn't get finished. Is that going to last in the second fight is the real question. I like Moreno, but really Deiveson is a destroyer. And if he's healthy, if he's ready, he can probably end it within 3 rounds.
True. And a lot of people forget that he cut weight 2 times in 2 weeks because he fought Alex Perez and then he fought Brandon Moreno, which, gave him the problems. Davison eventually is probably going to have to move up in weight because he cuts so much weight.
He's very big.
But with a full training camp, a full, however many weeks to get ready for Brandon Moreno this time, I think he's going to do it. And like Adam said, I think he's going to probably get a finish. I'm going to be putting 0.5 units on Figueiredo by submission. Brandon Moreno at plus 700. So that would be 3.5 units if that hits. I think that's a very likely
great
outcome.
long odds.
I think it's a very likely outcome because Brandon Moreno, the Mexican fighting spirit, probably going to be hard to finish with punches, as we've seen before. He's super tough, but I mean, Figueiredo finished Joseph Benavidez, and don't sleep on his jiu-jitsu because it might be the best in the division just because he's such a wild man on the feet. We kind of tend to forget, how he finished Joseph Benavidez, which was super impressive.
Yeah, he reminds me kind of like a newer version of Jose Aldo, where he's big for his weight class. His frame is really big, so he's got long arms and he carries a lot of that power at the end of his reach. And you don't really see him like dump all of his energy early in the fight. I think Moreno, like you said, he's going to bring that kind of spirit where he's going to go out on his shield. So I think he's going to put up a good fight, but I don't know, it's going to be violent. So any longer than 3 rounds is going to be surprising to me.
Yeah, rematches don't go the same way. And the last one went to a decision. There's probably going to be a finish here. So I'd be willing to take a little stab at Figueiredo by submission at plus 700. I mean, you kidding me?
The odds are nice, yeah. And if he hurts Moreno and Moreno starts scrambling, trying to maybe get a hold of a leg or get to a defensive position and shell up and avoid some damage, if he doesn't flat KO him, then a submission is not bad at plus 700, not at all.
Yeah, especially in those lighter weight divisions. Usually, you don't have somebody just get hit and fall like face forward like you do in the heavyweight division or light heavyweight division. It's usually a knockdown and then there's some kind of ground and pound to a scramble. It's kind of what I see happening here with Figueiredo end up on his neck or an arm. Adam, anything else to add before we head on to the main event?
Yeah, I agree with you guys.
Picking Figueiredo.
Yes, Davison Figueiredo round 1, Davison Figueiredo round 2, a half unit on either ones. Those are my 2 plays. That's how I break up the 1 unit I'm spending on Davison.
Fuck yeah. So moving on to the main event. Marvin Vettori versus Israel Adesanya. This will be for the middleweight belt. Adam, why don't you go first?
Oh, sure, yeah. Speaking of watching fights, I just watched Adesanya Vettori number 1 this morning as well. And I mean, it just is so crazy how both guys are different and, appear different just from that fight. Even Israel won a split decision on that night, if you guys remember. I felt should have been a unanimous decision, but then again, the UFC judges, you know how they go. But now Israel's coming in off like the first loss of his MMA career, when he lost as a kickboxer, he came back and went on the tear that had him reach the heights in that sport before making the switch to MMA. And I feel like it'll be no different now. Like he's ready, fully focused on, he knows all the like pleasures of being a worldwide superstar that he enjoys are, consequent of him being the UFC middleweight champion. So if he lets that go away, the lifestyle he's built from himself will come crumbling down. And with that really is like a more like long-term plan of the UFC, which more and more people have been talking about recently with like UFC Africa possibly next year. It's like still something in the works, even because there's like three champions of African heritage right now. If that number goes down to 2 or even 1, then that's dead on arrival. It won't happen. So Izzy has to do his part. Kamaru and Francis, keep winning and all that. But yeah, I like the team of City Kickboxing. They've always had him ready. He just went in against a man that was 25 pounds heavier than him on the night in Jan Blachowicz. And I think Israel gets it done against someone that's more his size. And also of note, he has an 86% takedown defense in the middleweight division. So it's not, if you're coming expecting the same fight you saw against Blachowicz last time, be prepared for something very different. I think Israel wins this and he gets a second or third round finish, but we'll see how that goes.
Yeah, I think the odds are that Adesanya likely stops the fight inside of 15 minutes. I like Vettori. Like, he's not a bad fighter at all, but it's so interesting in their approach to fighting, right? Like, Vettori strikes me as this lunchbox, hard hat, blue collar fighter who's going to come in and he wins his fights via just work rate, hard work, and just staying after it, right? Adesanya is not that guy. Adesanya is like a painter where he's coming out here and he's coming to put on a masterpiece. And the skill disparity in their striking, I think, is just too wide for me to side with Vettori. Like, Robert Whittaker is the kind of guy who, fighting a high energy, high volume kind of fight, can bring the type of fight that I think Vettori wants to bring to Adesanya. I think Whittaker is more suited for that. And we saw what happened to Robert Whittaker. And not only did Adesanya move up and face a guy that's 25 pounds heavier, that guy's also the champion at 205 pounds. So Blachowicz didn't even blow him out of the water. Like, he won the fight the way he had to win the fight. Jan probably looked better in the striking exchanges than you would have expected because he's been slept on basically his whole career, even after winning the belt. But going back down to 185, this is where Adesanya belongs. This is where he's at his natural weight. He's most free. I just see him getting some kind of counter shot KO here. Maybe it's not a one and done KO, but I see him stopping the fight with strikes inside of 15 minutes.
Well, I appreciate your guys' analysis, but I'm going to have to go the other way. And I'm going to have a unit on Marvin Vettori at plus 210. So let's start off with Marvin Vettori, 17-4-1, Israel Adesanya at 20-1. Obviously, that lost to John Blachowicz. I think that John kind of created a blueprint that Marvin can follow. Even he doesn't even have to follow that blueprint. He can do it his own way with what we've seen versus Jack Hermanson. Izzy has a problem with takedowns in open space, not so much against the cage. But I don't see the striking differential being that much different. There's still a lot of holes in Izzy's striking game. Marvin gave him fits in that third round. Kelvin Gastelum was giving him fits on the feet too, and he's not any kickboxing champion. I think Marvin Vettori is being slept on here big time. The line should be closer. Now, if you can get a better line, if the line was pick'em, I would probably bet Adesanya. But I think Marvin Vettori is super primed here. His work rate is going to give him problems in the later rounds, especially if it doesn't end in the first 15 minutes, and then Adesanya has to defend these takedowns for another rounds 4 and 5. I think he's in big trouble here. I don't see a finish. I see it going to decision, and I think that we're going to have our arms up in the air like this was a great fight. I don't know who won, but I think it is enough for me to put a unit on Marvin Vettori at plus, 2-1 underdog. I honestly think Adesanya is a better champ for the sport. He's more charismatic. He's got a better following. He's just got this steez about him. but this sport's very unforgiving. We're going to see Adesanya lose and Nate Diaz lose in the same night, probably, as far as my predictions go. And maybe one of them happens and the other one doesn't. But I just feel like Marvin Vettori is strong enough. I mean, Adesanya hasn't really fought the same caliber of grapplers as Marvin Vettori is, and what he can do and what we've seen him do to Kevin Holland and Jack Hermanson. I think it doesn't sound great. Marvin Vettori, middleweight champ and new, but I think that's what's going to happen. Do you guys have any response to that?
Well, I mean, I hear you, but like, here's what it comes right down to. Like, is Marvin Vettori as strong as Jan Blachowicz? That's the answer. That's because everyone knows what's going to happen. Like, Marvin's going to try and take Izzy down, and Izzy, as I say, supports this 86% takedown defense in the division. So will that hold up, or will, Marvin be strong enough to do exactly what Jan did? So we'll have to find that out. But I think Israel's ready to stuff the takedowns this time. Might even get him with a knee, like leaning in for one or something.
I don't think he needs to be as strong as John. I think he just needs to be able to hold him down. And I mean, Israel does have good takedown defense, but once he gets down, he doesn't really get back up.
But you only saw that one time. It only happened the one time. I mean, it happened a little bit in the first fight with these two late in the fight. Both different fighters now. And like I said, Vettori is a work rate type of fighter, right? So he's going to go in there to fight that high pace fight and try to make it that grindy type of grappling match that is going to favor him. I think what we saw in the Blachowicz fight is that Jan striking, his kickboxing skill was good enough and the power was enough of a threat where Adesanya wasn't able to just do what he wanted to do. He had to respect Blachowicz as a striker, and that's where the takedown came from. So we'll see if Vittori's kickboxing is good enough at range to make Adesanya respect it, and then the takedown will come from that. If he can't hang with him at kickboxing range, it's going to be tough for Vettori. I mean, he can maybe shoot in desperately and try and get something from a distance, but that's typically not a good formula for a guy who's got good takedown defense and good balance. So we'll see.
And to add to your point about the kickboxing exchanges, Nick, Izzy has a 6-inch reach advantage, and he's already unorthodox enough where that might actually appear like more of a reach advantage when throwing his swinging his limbs from various angles on fight night. So let's see how it plays out.
So yeah, if the fight is dictated at range, then I think Izzy's going to win. But if it's closer against the cage or on the ground, Marvin Vettori is going to win, in my opinion.
He's got to smother him to win.
Correct. Yeah, at range, I mean, Izzy might be the best that the UFC has right now as far as managing distance. Super, kind of like John Jones. You're not going to beat him at range. But
well, think about Cael Sonnen and Anderson Silva won, right? Cael was landing strikes, like he surprised Anderson with his left hand. He was able to get his respect enough standing to get the takedowns and basically dominate the whole fight. I mean, Adesanya is not Anderson Silva off of his back, so he can't afford to be in that position late in the fight. But the second time they fought, Anderson stopped him pretty brutally. So that's why I would just favor Adesanya to win inside the distance in this fight.
Well, as they say, we'll see what happens.
That's why they fight.
That's why they do it, right?
That's why they do it.
Well, this has been fun. Thank you guys again for coming on.
Thank you.
Thank you.
As my shout out for the night, at the end of each show, I'd like to give some shout outs. Jairzinho Rosenstruck for making me look smart last weekend. I'm going to give a shout out to him. The Fighting Pride of Suriname, who also has liked a couple of my tweets directed at his way. Anybody else got any shout outs to give this week?
My shout out is again to the group, the Fist Fight Enjoyers. You guys keep it active and keep it popping there, and it's always good to come in and have a laugh. Well, yeah, great
Shout out
fights. We're
to
looking
Ewan.
forward to it. Let's see how it goes.
Shout out
Yeah.
to Ewan and Ryan, who
Shout out to Ollie, Justin, and Rug, and Will, Harold, and Sam, and B. Everyone in there.
I think I added
Shout out, man.
Nick.
Let's see.
I added Nick in there, but
Yeah, I'm in there. I'm just getting my legs though. Like there's so much going on in there. I feel weird just like hopping in and jumping in on a conversation that I am only a little bit a part of.
yeah, you just got to go for it, man.
I'll get better, man.
You have any shout outs this week?
I'm gonna shout out 209 Stockton, California. I'm a California guy, so I'm always gonna pull for Nate. Let's do it.
Let's do it. And
Good.
in that light, that would be our buddy Good Bert, who is from the 209, who didn't make it this week, but shout out to him as well.
Shout out to Bert.
I hope his back gets better. And for everyone else, step your game up. We are out.